The galaxy groaned beneath the shadow of the throne. Worlds that once sang with color and life now bent their voices to silence, their skies patrolled by fleets marked with the sigil of the Galactic King. His empire stretched across constellations like a choking hand, fingers curling tighter with every year. Those who resisted vanished, those who obeyed endured in chains. Fear was the king's greatest weapon, and he wielded it with surgical precision. Yet fear cannot penetrate every corner. On a forgotten world, beneath a canopy of storm-dark clouds, a woman lived in quiet exile. She was known by many names across the scattered tongues of the galaxy, though none dared speak them aloud. Some called her the Shadow Queen, others the widow of 1,000 wars. But to the few who remembered and whispered in taverns with lights dimmed low, she was simply Baba Yaga. Once she had been a weapon herself. Once she had drenched planets in blood at the bidding of men who thought they could hold her leash. Once her name had ended rebellions and cowed kings. And then she had vanished. To most, she was only myth, a ghost conjured to frighten reckless soldiers. To herself, she was something simpler, a mother. For the first time, she had laid down her blades and her warships, hidden herself from every eye, and built a life for her children. They were twins, a boy and a girl, born in the same breath beneath the dim suns of that secret world. Their laughter filled the hollow places of her heart. They had never seen the inside of a warship, never heard the word empire. To them, the galaxy was no wider than the forests and oceans of their hidden home, and no darker than the shadow of their mother's embrace. Baba Yaga had thought herself free. But freedom was a fragile thing, and fate was not merciful. The king's spies found what none should have known. Whispers of her survival reached ears too eager for favor. And the king, remembering well the terror she once inspired, considered her children not as innocents but as threats. To him, bloodlines were daggers, heirs were seeds of rebellion. If Baba Yaga's twins grew to adulthood, they might inherit her legend. That was intolerable. The order was given without ceremony. An execution squad descended on the hidden world, steel boots crushing the earth where the twins had once played. They struck with precision, striking not at the mother but at her heart. By the time Baba Yaga returned from the hunt with her companions, an iron-chained dog whose growl could shatter a soldier's nerve, and a honey badger with jaws like traps, the forest was silent. Too silent. She found them lying together, her boy and her girl, their small hands clasped even in death. The squad had left quickly, efficient and cold. There were no survivors, no chance of mercy. Only the bodies of children and the ruin of a sanctuary. She knelt there for hours. The rain came, soft at first, then in torrents, until her hair clung to her face and her hands were mud-stained. The dog whined at her side, the honey badger hissed low and restless, but she did not move. Her eyes were dry, too dry, as if grief had burned them hollow. When at last she rose, it was with the silence of a woman whose tears had been stolen. The galaxy would feel that silence. When Baba Yaga returned to her old ship, long buried beneath the soil of her refuge, she stripped away the dust and vines that clung to its hull. She ran her hand along the black metal, a caress like a vow. The engines roared awake after years of slumber, echoing like thunder through the valley. Her pets stood ready at her side, the dog snarling at phantoms, the honey badger pacing with the impatience of hunger. She had buried her children with her own hands. She had carved their names into stone. And now, with her heart an iron furnace, she turned to the only craft she still remembered: war. The first strike came swift. A garrison of the king's soldiers stationed on a nearby moon vanished overnight. The reports that filtered back to the throne spoke of shredded armor, walls painted with blood, and a message scorched into the hangar floor: "For my children." The king dismissed it at first. Rebellions were common, and he believed no single woman could threaten his empire. But then another garrison fell. Then a patrol fleet, its wreckage drifting silent through the void. Survivors whispered of a ship like a phantom, its captain cloaked in black, flanked by beasts that no weapon could tame. The galaxy began to remember her name. In taverns and barracks, her story spread like wildfire. She was the mother whose children had been murdered by the king, the warrior who had returned from exile with vengeance in her veins. Soldiers spoke her name with fear, and slaves spoke it with hope. Baba Yaga did not care for hope. She did not fight for freedom or justice. She fought for her children and nothing else. Each battle was a prayer whispered to the dead, each kill an offering laid at their feet. She was not a savior. She was a storm, and storms do not stop until they have scoured the world clean. The galaxy had not seen a campaign like hers in generations. Wars were waged by fleets, their admirals hidden behind layers of protocol and strategy, but Baba Yaga fought like a blade pressed to the jugular. Her movements were unpredictable, her strikes devastating. She chose targets that mattered not for their size but for their symbolism, places where the king's rule seemed unshakable. When those fell, fear rippled outward like cracks across glass. The first of these was the labor colony on Veros 4, a bleak world of ash and sulfur where thousands toiled under the Empire's whips. 4 decades, its mines had fueled the king's fleets, and its overseers boasted that not even death could free a man from his chains there. Baba Yaga landed in the dead of night, her ship masked against sensors, her companions restless at her side. The dog slipped down the ramp first, muscles tight, jaws flexing as if already tasting blood. The honey badger followed, its claws clicking softly against the metal floor. The workers, huddled in their barracks, thought at first the sounds were only the wind. Then the alarms howled. By dawn, the overseers were gone, their bodies broken in the dust. The gates had been torn down, the guards slaughtered with an efficiency that chilled even those who cheered her name. She did not stay to rule or rebuild. She left the colony to the freed slaves, departing with nothing but the echo of her vow. The message carved into the smoldering command tower was clear. The king took my children. I will take everything. From Veros, her legend grew. She struck next at a convoy of supply ships, seizing their cargo and delivering it to starving refugees on a border world. When a communication relay fell silent, its control center a ruin of twisted steel, the Empire's admirals began to panic. Each attack left behind survivors, trembling witnesses who carried her story further, spreading it faster than any fleet could contain. Whispers of her became rallying cries. Outlaws who had once preyed on the weak now swore allegiance to her cause. Veterans who had deserted the Empire's wars returned to fight under her banner. She gathered them not as soldiers but as wolves, each pack given freedom to strike as they willed, so long as they bled the king's dominion. It was not loyalty to ideals that drew them, but to her. In her presence there was no question of hesitation. She was fury embodied, a living reminder that the Empire was not invincible. Even in silence, she commanded with her eyes, sharp as blades, and the beasts at her side made obedience instinctive. Yet the king was not idle. His first counterstroke was brutal. On the edge of the Karen sector, his warships descended on a world that had whispered too loudly of rebellion. They scoured it to ash, leaving its oceans boiling and its cities blackened. The message was unmistakable: defy him and all would burn. Baba Yaga arrived too late to save them. She stood among the ruins, smoke rising around her, her companions restless with the scent of scorched flesh. For the first time since her war began, her silence faltered. She spoke not to her allies but to the void itself, her voice low and ragged. He cannot kill faster than I can burn. Her retaliation came swift. She hunted down the admiral who had led the purge, tracking his fleet across 3 systems. Each ambush left fewer of his ships alive, until at last she cornered him above the barren moon of Drosen. Her ship tore into his flagship like a predator into prey, breaching its hull with a violence that echoed through its corridors. The battle within was chaos. Her forces clashed with armored troopers in brutal combat, her dog dragging men from their feet, its jaws crushing through plastisteel. The honey badger darted beneath the chaos, a streak of fury that shredded limbs and left screams trailing in its wake. Baba Yaga herself moved with lethal grace, each strike a memory of her children's laughter turned to rage. When she found the admiral, he begged for mercy. He swore he had only followed orders. His voice cracked with fear as he promised her riches, safety, even amnesty. She listened without expression, her shadow falling long across his trembling form. Then she put her blade through his chest, slow enough that he felt the weight of her silence. The galaxy trembled at the news of his death. Admirals who once boasted of loyalty now looked to their fleets with unease. If the Empire's most ruthless commanders could be hunted and slain, who among them was safe? And still her legend grew. For every victory, however, came loss. Not all who rallied to her side survived. The king's assassins moved in shadows, cutting down her lieutenants, poisoning her supplies, whispering doubts into the ears of her recruits. Each betrayal cut deeper than steel, reminding her that she fought not only armies but the very nature of fear itself. One night, as her fleet regrouped in the shadow of a dead star, a traitor opened the hangar doors to the void, venting dozens of her fighters into nothingness. The survivors dragged the traitor before her. He wept, pleading that the king had promised him his family's freedom. Baba Yaga listened in silence, her dog growling, her honey badger pacing like a storm about to break. At last she spoke. "He took my family. You thought he would spare yours." She let the honey badger have him. None spoke of betrayal again. But the king was learning. He had underestimated her once, and now he moved with greater precision. Entire sectors bristled with fortifications, his fleets spread into vast nets to catch her. He sought to choke her with his numbers, to bleed her by attrition until her legend dwindled into dust. She answered with fire. Her war was no longer the lonely vengeance of a mother. It was becoming something greater, something she had not sought but could not prevent. Systems rose in defiance, their people emboldened by her survival, their banners carrying the mark of her wrath. They began to see her not just as a hunter but as a queen, a figure destined to topple thrones. Baba Yaga did not care for thrones, but she did not stop them from believing. Her gaze turned toward the heart of the empire. She knew where the war would end, though the path there would carve rivers of blood. The king sat in his fortress world, surrounded by legions, his throne a crown of metal and light. To reach him, she would need more than fury. She would need an army. And the galaxy, broken though it was, seemed ready to give her one. The throne world of the Empire was a fortress unlike any other. Its skies were latticed with orbital cannons, its surface armored with endless cities that fed and shielded the king's seat of power. It was said no enemy had ever breached its defenses, no fleet had ever come within sight of its spires without being reduced to drifting ash. The king trusted in that history. He trusted in the fear it inspired. But fear had failed him once already. Baba Yaga's fleet emerged from the void like a wound opening in space. Ships cobbled from rebellion and ruin, scarred but unbroken, filled the darkness. Their weapons burned with stolen energy, their crews hardened by losses that had left them with nothing but rage. At the heart of it all was her vessel, black as shadow, gliding forward with a predator's certainty. On its prow, she stood with her companions, the dog's eyes gleaming, the honey badger's claws rasping against steel. The Empire answered with fire. Waves of destroyers surged outward, a tide of steel and light. They outnumbered her 10-1, their formations drilled, their admirals confident in overwhelming might. Yet when the first volleys flared across the void, her fleet did not break. They wove through the barrage with impossible precision, turning the Empire's order into chaos. Smaller ships darted into gaps, striking engines, crippling weapons, scattering giants. Every explosion lit her path closer to the throne world. Baba Yaga's voice carried across her comms, low and steady, each word cutting through static like a blade. "We burn for the children. We bleed for the dead. Do not stop until the throne is ash." Her allies answered with silence, But it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of wolves on the hunt. The first line of defense shattered. The second wavered. By the time her fleet reached orbit, the Empire's admirals were already sending frantic reports to the throne. Still, the king did not rise from his seat. He watched from his iron dais, convinced that the weight of his legions would crush her. He remembered her as a shadow from the past, a single woman who had once haunted his empire. He could not see what she had become. The drop onto the surface was fire and ruin. Baba Yaga led the descent herself, her ship knifing through the atmosphere, hull blazing like a star. Around her, landing craft poured streams of rebels into the street. The dog leapt to the ground first, chains rattling, its growl reverberating through the ruined city blocks. The honey badger followed, snapping at armored corpses as if daring the next to come. The battle on the ground was a storm. Empire soldiers poured from their fortresses, lines of gleaming armor and disciplined fire. But discipline faltered when the rebels did not retreat. They fought like the condemned, each strike a defiance against years of chains. And always at the center was Baba Yaga, her coat sweeping behind her, her weapon carving through steel and bone alike. Where she moved, her beasts followed, tearing apart any who dared approach. The city groaned beneath the weight of their war. Towers collapsed, fire swept through avenues, and the sky was split with the sound of dying machines. Yet through it all she advanced. Each step brought her closer to the spire where the king's throne waited. The resistance bled for her. Whole squadrons sacrificed themselves to hold choke points, to stall the advance of armored divisions, to buy her time. They did not need her orders. They knew that their war would end only when she stood before the king. And so they threw themselves into the maw of death, leaving trails of bodies in her wake. At last, she reached the base of the throne spire. Its gates towered over the battlefield, sealed with layers of alloy thicker than ships' hulls. For centuries, they had kept enemies at bay. Now they shook beneath the pounding of her weapons. When the gates fell, it was not only metal that broke but the illusion of invulnerability. Inside, the halls gleamed cold and vast, lined with statues of the king's victories. She walked among them with no pause, her boots echoing, her companions prowling at her side. Guards rushed to intercept, their armor reflecting the sterile light, their rifles blazing. The dog met them in a blur of muscle and teeth, ripping men from their formation. The honey badger slipped beneath their fire, claws tearing through flesh and steel alike. Baba Yaga's blade found the rest, each strike unerring, each motion a reminder that she had not come for conquest but for vengeance. At the end of the hall, the throne awaited. It rose like a crown of jagged metal, its spines reaching toward the high ceiling, its surface glowing faintly with the hum of hidden machinery. Upon it sat the king, robed in black and silver, his face hard with arrogance. He did not rise as she approached. He only regarded her with cold eyes, as though she were still the shadow he once dismissed. "So," he said at last, his voice carrying through the chamber like a blade scraping stone, "the witch returns. Did you think you could unmake my empire with rage alone?" Her silence was her answer. She stepped forward, each pace steady, her weapons glinting in the throne's cold light. Her dog snarled low, the honey badger hissed, and the air thickened with the weight of inevitability. The king rose then, his frame towering, his robes parting to reveal armor that pulsed with the power of ancient technology. In his hand was a blade humming with energy, a weapon that had ended dynasties. He descended the throne's steps with the confidence of a man who had ruled unchallenged for decades. "Your children were nothing," he said, voice thick with disdain. "And soon, so will you be." The word struck like fire through her veins. She moved, faster than breath, her blade meeting his with a clash that split the silence. Sparks rained across the chamber as steel met energy, fury met arrogance. The dog lunged at his guards, the honey badger carved through their ranks, and the throne room dissolved into chaos. But Baba Yaga saw only him.